Welcome to this the Armidale Regional Council meeting for the year in, I was about to say stormy gyre, but it looks like it's about to pass. So we, the councillors of the Armidale region, declare that we will undertake the duties of the office of councillor in the best interests of our community and faithfully and impartially carry out the functions, powers, authorities and discretions vested in us to the best of our skill and judgment. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. The Armidale regional communities pay tribute to their love of land, love of people and love of culture. So this meeting has been audio and video recorded, and the recordings of the non-confidential parts of the meeting will be made available on the internet. No other persons are permitted to record the meeting unless specifically authorised by council to do so. For those 3 people who have been registered to have your say, please ensure your comments are relevant to the particular agenda item. The chairperson may withdraw the privilege to speak where a speaker makes personal remarks or criticisms or use abusive or inappropriate language. Speakers do not enjoy any special protection arising from comments made during council meetings and should therefore refrain from making any defamatory remarks or personal defamatory statements against any individual. May I ask you all to turn your phones to silent or off, please? Thank you. Councillors, we have an apology from Councillor Matt. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Martin, Councillor Kiley, those in favour? Thank you. Any disclosures of interest for today's meeting? Councillor O'Brien?
I'm not sure, but on the issue of the alcohol in the mall for the twilight, I do have a business in the middle of the mall. I don't know whether that means I should not vote on this or not, but...
Potentially.
Potentially, all right, well, I'll leave for that one.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any others? Councillor O'Brien?
Oh, sorry.
Have your say. We've got 3, as I said. Ms. Helen Webb, please, if you don't mind coming up to the podium there. Helen wishes to speak for the rescission motion council meeting about response to climate emergency resolution. Now, you do have 5 minutes, and after that, Owen, will it come up on the screen?
The climate emergency declaration. So next slide, please. So this is my business as usual. This morning I was up at 6:30 down on the creeklands weeding, trying to make it a beautiful place so that people can enjoy being there. It's lovely down there. It's green. It's nice. Next slide. Then I went out to where we water the horses. And that's it today, shrivelling up no feed. You're all familiar with that situation, but it's kind of holding this energy between business as usual and everything's okay, but also this aspect of things that business, it's not okay, and we need to act and move forward on. And it gives us information on what needs to be acted on and what areas we can act on. Next slide. We've also got the state government's guide to climate change risk assessment for local government that was presented at the conference that we attended a couple of weeks ago. Next slide. And net zero emissions guidance for New South Wales councils. This is a draft, but apparently the minister's pretty keen to get things happening in this area. Next slide. The Western Enabling Regional Adaptation, which looks at things that we can change in order to adapt. So we're talking about lowering emissions, we're talking about adapting. So what this shows is that we're not reinventing the wheel, that this is just a few things that I've put up there that show that there's energy from the government to get it happening. There's a lot of information that we can draw on. And next slide. We've got the council planning process, which you would all be aware of. And so there's the issue within this of resourcing. If we're going to allocate priorities, where do we allocate our resources to? I say that the evidence that we see around us shows that the climate emergency is the area that we need to focus our resources on, and that includes adaptation in the form of water, looking after the water, air quality, whatever we can do, and it includes lowering emissions. So I appreciate Diane's point at the last meeting, which was that, you know, let's do the report and get it right. We can delay it and, you know, it needs to be right. But I think we need to emphasise it's a process. It's not easy to get the end point of solving the climate crisis. It's a process that we've got to move through. And I think that it's really valuable to use the energy that's in the community and move forward with us to get and done by April, which the community is happy to contribute to. To do that, we need to get the sustainability. Or someone's got a motion in about that, just getting that happening so it can be more effective. Council will be endorsing the green print today, and so we can make use of the things that are already in the green print about this that will help us to move forward. So I ask for your support on those three things, that support on the rescission motion to get the report done by April so that any things within that can go in the budget, and also so that, I mean, there's within that government information there's an opportunity to get funding. So if we move through those things, we might be able to get funding happening to get it to help us in this process. So for those three things, if you could consider my comments, I appreciate it. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Helen. Our second speaker is Mr. Robert Gordon. Come forward, Robert. Robert's wants to speak on item 9.4, update on EOI Armidale Regional Airport.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everybody. I am currently speaking on behalf of the Armidale Regional Ratepayers Association. in regard to the motion in front of you in terms of a full report to Council at the February meeting. Our concern rests with the part of the present deliberations that the Council CEO and staff, and we're unaware how many councillors are familiar and to what extent, but it relates to a change of ownership and control, possible potential change of ownership and control of the Armidale Airport. We've established this as a high priority area, the airport issue. I've had some experience over the years in terms of research and representing views in regard to the Armidale Airport. I was a member of the airport working group for most of its duration, and also appeared before the New South Wales Government Upper House inquiry into regional air services. So I have acquired some knowledge, and that's why I head up the subcommittee within the Armidale Ratepayers Association. We were very concerned when we noticed, or was brought to our attention, that a public advertisement was going out calling for expressions of interest, and it included, if I remember correctly, 3 out of the 7 options put out to the private sector included partial or full sale of the airport. So we did some research, and we went to including the candidates meeting held in Armidale before the last state election, and universally the candidates were against sale of the airport and losing control of the airport. And subsequently, the federal member has been in touch with Council in relation to this, and he's indicated that he is supporting the continuation of the public ownership and control of Armidale Airport. We put forth a few questions to the CEO on this subject and received what we regard as unsatisfactory answers. They didn't do the questions or the subject justice in our view, so we requested an opportunity to meet with the CEO and discuss them more fully and explain our concerns. This was refused, and so we've been unable to take part in real meaningful consultation on this very important subject. And we noticed this to be a full report, but on the basis of it including the possibilities of sale and loss of control, we're very concerned that this inclusion continues. It's already incurred, I would imagine, significant money and time particularly on the part of those who are invited to contribute. And we feel that the positive alternative that we suggested, if I may just read that brief, it's very brief. 1 minute, right. Most of you will be familiar with this report, which was done by Council in 2016. We are calling for a review of that, an internal review to be done as a matter of urgency, but including such outside advice and consultation as is deemed necessary. So that's the positive alternative that we're putting up to the continuation of the limited understanding, but certainly very concerning attitude of the Council at this point. We would be, our association, I'm told, will be inviting councillors to consult with us further on this subject, because we fully concede there are serious problems for the Armidale Airport. But the
Thank you.
solution should not be to sell off our equity partially or fully.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Could I ask the third speaker, Mr. David Mills, to come forward, please? David's going to talk about item 11.3, which is the New England Rail Trail business case and future maintenance responsibilities. Thank you. Now, David, I don't know if you care to turn around occasionally. The timer's up there on the screen.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Good afternoon, staff, councillors, members of the gallery. I talk to you this afternoon as President of the New England Rail Trail. At today's council meeting, you have the opportunity and responsibility to make a difference in Armidale, Guyra and the wider New England. Armidale Regional Council has recorded its support in principle for the development of the rail trail between Black Mountain and Ben Lomond and beyond. Now is the time to back yourselves and your community to get this game-changing project underway. We've done everything that you have asked. We have consulted farmers, adjoining landowners, the community, the state government, the federal government, the business chambers, Glen Innes 7 Council and stakeholders. We've proven majority support the public. We've funded a business case, a community business case presented to council. Councillors, there is a cost to not seizing this opportunity. The rail corridor is not serving the community. The rail services north of Armidale were discontinued 3 decades ago. Even with the offer of hundreds of millions of dollars from the New South Wales government, no one has stepped forward to rebuild or use the Northern Line. There is no commercial demand for freight and or passenger by rail north of Armidale. The service is not coming back. The corridor is locked up for casual grazing for a few. It is weed infested with trees growing up in the disused tracks. The track is broken, disconnected in many places. It is a stranded asset with no public access. There is almost no public benefit to this important piece of public land. Yet we have seen across Australia and overseas how rail trails can economically, socially and environmentally transform regions. Victoria has at least 27 rail trails, boosting country economies. New Zealand, 5 major trails and many other smaller ones that attract visitors from all overseas. And the benefits go to locals, to B&Bs, to farm stays, to cafes, to bakeries, tour guides, wineries, retail shops and more. All of the issues raised as negatives prior to the rail trail have proven to be misinformed. Biosecurity hasn't been threatened. Privacy hasn't been breached. Stock haven't gone missing. Trails have been maintained and sustained without materially burdening ratepayers. Councillors, our region is hurting. Drought has taken a serious toll. Bushfires have ravaged our friends and neighbours. And this is not the time for another report, another study, reviews, another committee, but detailing existing work to satisfy all parties involved. There is not time for decision paralysis. This is the time for you to show leadership and to back the people. New jobs, visitors, money injected into our depressed economies. The drought will break, but it will be a long and slow recovery unless we can diversify. This is a formula that has worked brilliantly elsewhere across the world. Let's be clear, we're not asking Armidale Regional Council for funding or financial commitment. We are asking Council to assume responsibility for the management of a piece of land once Parliament passes legislation to amend the Transport Administration Act to close the rail corridor and convert it to public use. Our business case is predicated on state government funding to develop the trail and the plan of management that includes the governance framework to assume responsibility for its upkeep. Again, we can work together providing further detail to satisfy all parties involved. Council maintains control over its financial contributions. No ratepayers' funds will be used unless there is an allocation in future operational plans. Plans you have to adopt. Councillors, we've had to confront and manage a lot in the past few months, and you have done a magnificent job. Council will get through its current challenges. Now the New England Rail Trail is a rare opportunity to show that you are still a can-do council. You care about the villages and the people who live in there and work there. You are willing to have a go and set this region up for a premier destination for bike riders, cyclists, walking, hikers, and those who love the New England outdoors and history.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Now moving on to item 6, confirmation of minutes. Can I have a move and a second? Councillor Witters. Seconder. Councillor Martin. Any corrections? Okay, those in favour? Carried. Councillors, with your support, I'd like to bring forward 11.3 because there's a number of people in the audience, and we've done this in the past. If there's no people against this, I will just bring that forward. Any dissent? Okay. Oh, I've already done it. I say. Okay. A procedural. Councillor, I think Councillor Witters had his hand up too, didn't you? Yeah, Councillor Witters, Councillor Bailey. Those in favour? Carry. Righto, 11.3, which is a late item, supplementary agenda.
Could I move the adoption of that recommendation, please, Mr Mayor?
Councillor Bailey. Councillor Gilletley, Councillor Bailey.
Mr Mayor, the rail trail is an opportunity for the future. What's unusual about this proposal?
Sorry, hang on, please. Councillor O'Connor, your microphone, please. Sorry, Councillor Bailey.
What's unusual about this proposal is it has a benefit to so many communities. It has a benefit to Armidale. It has a benefit to Black Mountain. It has a benefit to Gyra. It has a benefit to Ben Lomond, and it has a benefit to places like Glencoe and Glennis to our north. Each can benefit by adding tourism opportunities, cafes, B&Bs, all sorts of things along the rail trail. I spoke this morning to one of the drivers of the Tumbarumba Rosewood Rail Trail, and they've been they're moving along quite quickly. One of the interesting things is that they sold a lot of the rail track off because it was warped and wasn't quite in the condition that you would want. And they sold it off, and for 22 kilometres they got $280,000. So you imagine the value of the rail that we could sell off that could go into a trust account to offset some of the costs associated with the ongoing maintenance. They don't believe maintenance will be a big concern because you'll get new fencing, you'll get new track down, you'll get a new gravel track down, and they're quite convinced that there won't be serious problems that way. Also, what is important to understand is that biodiversity concerns, which have been a problem in the past, the state government has adopted and it's on the LLS website, a biodiversity plan for all Crown lands such as these, and in the Tumbarumba Rosewood area, which is 22 kilometres, they've employed an external consultant who's gone and consulted with all the landholders along that line, and basically the biodiversity concerns have evaporated once they've gone and talked to them. So there are a number of things that I think that are important. What's also important is to realise that we don't let New South Wales fall behind. Victoria's now got 1,000 kilometres and still building, and there's more rail trails on the guidance. Even Queensland's worked out that rail trails are an opportunity for the future. Suggestions about co-sharing the rail trail with tourism trains might be a lovely idea. It's estimated that would cost about 15 times more than what a rail trail would cost, because you'd have to widen cuttings and do a whole variety of things. We're also proposing, I would hope also, that we exclude dogs and horses from the rail trail, because dogs do tend to wander, and that's when you get sheep destroyed and potty calves and the like. So if you exclude dogs, I think you overcome that. I think the other important thing is that we take back a corridor that's in disrepair at the moment and reduces a bushfire risk, because there'll be people looking after it. In the Tumbarumba Rosewood area, they've signed a contract with a prison farm down there, and they'll do a lot of the maintenance along there. But they don't believe the maintenance will be particularly heavy for 10 years, because there'll be new fences all the way along the rail line. So to me, it's an opportunity. To me, it's something to move forward. And the exciting part, I think, since we started, is it's gone from Armidale driving it to a partnership between Armidale and Glen Innes, and also the rail trail group. So there's 3 groups driving to make this happen. And I'm confident under the leadership that that group can provide, that we can provide a benefit to the region and provide jobs. So I have much pleasure in moving the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. My deepest apologies. I called out Councillor Galletley, but it's Councillor Gray that had a hand up. So sorry about that. Councillor Gray?
I am in total support of this rail trail for very similar reasons as my colleague Councillor Bailey. I think the Guyra community has really done an excellent job in the work that's gone on behind the scenes with the Rail Trail Committee and NERT, and they need to be commended on the work that they have done and how they've put the business case together and their vision for what's possible for a disused asset, yet it will bring a lot of community good, and that's why I am very much in favour of this motion.
A speaker against the motion? Councillor O'Brien?
A couple of things. The fact that we only got this motion last night, I wasn't aware of this motion, so it is very late for us to actually give proper scrutiny of it. And certainly for the community on such a huge issue that has major repercussions for future transport. This is a big issue. The community hasn't even seen the feasibility study. It's not been made public. I think we're rushing into this, and I think it would be prudent to defer it until the community has a chance to really look at it, discuss it. There is other projects that will be influenced by this, and also there's the Guyra Heritage people. What's going to happen with their program? What's going to happen with their project? What's going to happen with a project that that the Train Action Group are looking at for bringing back heritage train from here to Guyra? There's a number of issues that need to be sorted. I think bringing on this late, like this, I mean, I don't know how Mr. Mills heard about it enough to write a speech, but I certainly hadn't heard enough about it to write a speech. I think we should defer it until the next council meeting, that the community have a right to have input into such a huge decision. So I speak against the motion. I move to defer it to the next council meeting.
So you have an amendment that we defer it?
Yes.
So do we have a second? So Councillor O'Connor, you second? Do you want to speak any more for that, Councillor O'Brien, or?
No, that's it.
So Councillor O'Connor, you speak for the amendment?
Well, I think it's a procedural thing where speeches aren't really required, Mr. Mayor. I would support if I do have that opportunity. I think, as everybody in this room would know, Mr. Mills has very ably presented only one side of the case, and as Councillor Gray has indicated, it relates to Guyra but does not take into account the major and long-term transport needs of our entire region. This is not a stub line. This is not the same as the Tumbarumba to Rosewood exercise at all. This is not a disused minor line with an exhausted resource extraction process at the end of it. This is the connecting piece that connects our region to Queensland and the rest of the nation. Whether it's been out of action for 5 minutes or 30 years is irrelevant in a multi-generational decision-making process. I think the community deserves the respect of a deferral to the February meeting so that they have a chance to respond to this. I mean, it's a really much too big an issue, and there's inadequate notice, but also inadequate documentary material in our papers, even if we did have time to read them, to support the far-reaching recommendations that are in this, in particular the closing of the line. So I do second a deferral motion. It's an outrage that I think you'll find the community will be most distressed about, the idea of actually removing the protection under the Transport Administration Act from the rail corridor. I think it would be, look, there's so many alternatives to this, which would include heritage rail on the line, a return of passenger services, a return of freight services in the future. You want to cut off all of those when what we could do is negotiate, as they do in many places in Australia and around the world, a side-by-side facility. There's plenty of room in that corridor for a rail trail beside an active train rail line. So for many reasons, let's defer this and give us all, including the community that doesn't know this is even being debated today, the opportunity to talk about it. So I support that deferral motion.
Councillor O'Connor, you're on mic. Any speaker against the amendment? It's not an amendment, it's a motion. Councillor Gillespie? Councillor Gillespie? Councillor Tom? No. Okay. As a procedural motion, we don't need discussion, so I will put that to the vote. Is it what item? Hmm? Yeah. I will put that to the vote. The amendment, the procedural motion. Those in favour? Those are 5. Those against? 4, 5. And I have the casting vote. Will continue. So, Councillor Tiley, unless you... Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, my concern is that the meeting notes talk about a rail trail report that was written in September, and it was supposed to be attached to this report. And the fact that it wasn't attached means that we haven't got the information to make a sensible decision. So I would have thought that according to section 2.1 of the Model Code of Meeting Practice, we can't make a decision without actually having seen that report. And therefore, if it's against Code of Meeting Practice, then then we have to defer it.
You sound a bit crook there. So
I can't deny that.
I think she was going to say it would be prudent to defer it under those circumstances. I'm her voice.
So that was section 3.1 in the Code of 2.1?
Section 2.1 in the Model Code of Meeting Practice, which says that decisions are based on relevant quality information. And that rail trail report that certainly I haven't seen and several other councillors haven't seen is relevant to making a decision on this.
The procedure motion has been agreed to, so I think we move on this. So, Councillor Bailey and Councillor Gray, you have spoken. Is there a speaker against?
Yep.
Councillor Witters?
Yeah, it was 5-5 with a casting vote.
Councillor O'Connor, there was 5-5, and I declared as a casting vote that the motion was declined. Councillor Witters.
Yeah, I sort of was, in lieu of the deferral, the lost deferral action, and in regards to Councillor O'Connor's points, I'm now speaking against this motion. I think, as was stated, a deferral to allow time to read the report that Councillor Robinson spoke about would have been better. But I have a few other different concerns I've written down in regards to this. How I'm not against a rail trail. I think it's a great idea. I think it's a good way to bring people to the community. Again, my thoughts have always been there needs to be extra, it's a word I can't really pronounce, subsidiary businesses to go with it. So people talk about B&Bs and all these other things that'll bring in more tourists. But there are a lot of could-be statements, like we could get a lot of these, we could get a lot of that. Same could be said if we had the train line back open, we could get more industry, we could get all this sort of stuff. So I would like to see, with a rail trail, these businesses ready to go. Like, not, oh, if we get this, we'll have that. Like, we've got this, we've got that. That's what I'd like to see more of. But also, it comes around the town planning, the state planning, and all that sort of stuff on whether state government then says, well, as a region, you guys are now this, and we're, because, as I mentioned before, we're the end of the line for transport in regards to the train and the aeroplanes. They might say, well, we're now going to start getting things into you guys and open up that line. So places such as Tetterfield, Glenninus, and the smaller surrounding areas then can then hook into that main centre of us to get them to Newcastle, Sydney, all that sort of stuff. So how this fits around the actual state planning and long term, again, this is a short term project. It looks good to begin with, but how long term sustainable in regards to building the regions. So whether it fits around all those other plans that we're all looking at is another issue. Mr. Mills mentioned, I think it was the Transport Administration Act. I'd like to see get assurances from the state government on the likelihood that they do pass that, and whether from both sides of government actually, because whether the opposition then get into power and amend that and put it back in, then all the plans, because...
Councillor Gillette, Councillor O'Connor. Sorry, Councillor Witters.
All the plans for that... you finished? Or do you want me to wait for you?
Councillor Gillette.
Well, we're not Robinson Crusoe there, are we? So back to that. So whether those plans get amended is really an issue. So I don't want to throw out that we're supporting this, but then somewhere higher up says no, you can't, because then that puts all our eggs into one basket, and I think that's not fair to the community and region, because we need something like this to bring tourism and everything else like that. But whether we're, as was mentioned earlier, whether we're rushing it. So that's my concern with it, and I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Tyler, you wish to speak for the...
I wish to speak, Mr. Mayor. I find myself in an invidious situation by virtue of the procedural motion having been put and defeated. I think the presentation by Mr. Mills was compelling. Councillor Bailey highlighted what will definitely be benefits from a rail trail. I think that needs to be underscored for starters. The other side of the coin is that at 8 o'clock this morning, I found a late supplementary item on my laptop. I went in and I read it. I went to the attachments. There were no attachments. The RDA Northern Inland business case was nowhere to be seen. Whether we like it or not, there are a lot of people who are against this project. In fairness to them, I think it is inappropriate for this council, at a few hours' notice, to pass this resolution, or any resolution today. Not much is going to happen over the Christmas period. We're not going to lose a lot of time because Armidale's deserted in January. They'll come down to my place. So let's hasten slowly. Let's give those opponents at least the opportunity to read the business case and offer substantive objection. At the end of the day, I'll probably be voting for the proposal as it's printed. But let's do the right thing by those we represent. Thank you.
A speaker for...
And I intend, If this motion's lost, I will move the recommittal of the procedural motion that we defer to the February meeting.
A speaker for the motion? Councillor Bailey, you're right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's no guarantees in life, and when you establish a rail trail, no, you can't expect 40 people to come forward and say, if you build a rail trail, I'll open a business. It doesn't work that way. It's the same as if we build an airport business park. We haven't got 20 contracts ready to roll out the door to put onto all those blocks of land. We've got a lot of people we're talking to, and I think the rail trail is exactly the same. But the experience in other communities across Australia is that B&Bs open up, cafes open up, all sorts of opportunities open up along the route about every 20 to 22 kilometres. The other important point, the concern that Councillor Witters raised was about what happens if the government changes hands. Well, firstly, I would hope that the rail trail is built by the time this government comes to the end of its term. Secondly, Jodie McKay, who was up here recently, and an erstwhile colleague of hers, the Honourable Mick Veach, an MLC who actually lives in the Tumbarumba area, are both in favour of the rail trail. The concern about closing the Great Northern Rail Line, yep, it is a big concern if it was being used, if we could prove the freight was there. Companies such as John Holland have done business case studies on the viability of a freight hub using the rail line. It's not viable. I've spoken to Costa. They won't use it for tomatoes because we can't guarantee freight through every day. And when it gets to the other end, it's got to be offloaded and taken to various venues. There's no mineral here that we can use to load it. The last time we had a freight service here, it carried, a passenger service, they carried 6 to 7 people north a day. Wow. You'd be better off to put them in a taxi. It's just not a viable opportunity. I think we've got to move forward, give the smaller communities the opportunity to take the ball and run with it, and have the trust in our staff and the Glen Innes staff and the New England Rail Trail to come back to us with a more concrete proposal. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey.
Can I again ask my question? And that is, if we violate the code of meeting practice, will our resolution not be considered invalid? And I'd like an answer before we take a vote.
No, it won't. So I'll put the vote. Those in people of the motion. For those people against.
Mr. Mayor, I will move the recommittal of the motion to defer. It's a procedural motion which you don't debate.
Do I have a seconder for that? Second.
Thank
okay,
you.
I'll put that to the vote. And hang on, just Councillor Gray, I think it was. Yes. So have we got, just before we do, just to, no, have you got it up?
It's strictly procedural to reopen.
Yep.
Send it down, Huey.
Sorry, Councillor, I can't hear you, Councillor.
Wouldn't that be good?
Somebody like Tony? Procedure motion
I'll just vote.
deferred to the next council meeting, is that? Hang on.
The first thing you do is that the motion to defer be recommitted to the vote. Yes or no, and then you re-vote on that matter. Okay.
Okay, Councillor, no, it's just procedural, so it'd be straightforward.
Is it just to recommit it?
Yeah, those people in favour of recommitting as is?
Yes.
Defer.
This is halfway to deferring. Okay.
Those people against?
I now move that the matter be deferred to the February council meeting.
Seconder, Councillor Gray. You wish to speak for it, I put that, those, so Councillor Gray?
As a seconder of that, I just would like to explain that I did note that the report has come through via email, and yet there has been some technical problems with it. So I do believe that the councillors do need the opportunity to be able to have the opportunity to read that report.
Okay, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? It's carried. Moving on to item...
Mr Mayor, can I also, we move that we deal with the other motion of the Speaker, that's the climate change rescission motion, since they're here as well?
Well, we're going on to that right now.
Oh, well, there, thank you.
So, item 8.1. Well, 8.1 is just before 8.2, so it was only a minute or two to do it, haven't we?
Well, I think the request, Mr Mayor, was that the 8.2, which relates to the climate change matter, be brought forward.
Yeah, but we're dealing with, Councillor O'Connor, we're dealing with 8.1 now, so it's only 2 minutes or 3 minutes.
Where are your hands?
So, 8.1, could I have a move and a second, please? Councillor Gray, Councillor Widders. Councillor Gray?
As the mover of putting in this rescission motion, and as I stated at the previous meeting and in communication with fellow councillors, this rescission motion has been put forward due to the risks associated with the wording, not the intention of the resolution from the last meeting. The risks to the community and council are real and jeopardise this region actually achieving having a hydrotherapy pool, particularly in light of Hunter New England Health permanently closing the hospital hydro pool. This region needs a hydro pool, and with the expanding population of people from countries where most do not learn to swim, it is vital to have a facility that is available to the public 12 months of the year. And to ignore risks associated with the wording of the resolution is tantamount to negligence. So I see these risks as four. One, that the subcommittee is formed without a terms of reference indicates and guides the subcommittee, ensuring it does not cross lines that would impact on potential voting on any expressions of interest or DAs that may come before this council, is clearly a risk to effective governance by this governing body. The importance of a terms of reference was something I heard from colleague Councillor Tiley in his days as administrator when he was part of establishing the terms of references for the current committee structure. This was a lesson well learned. And to proceed without means that an all-council subcommittee without community input is potentially more about councillors, and I am sad to say positioning themselves for re-election rather than doing the best for this community. One only needs to look at the agenda of this meeting to see that there is evidence of that. This resolution states that hydrotherapy pool, so the original resolution, needs to be part of the Moncton Aquatic Centre, include a gym, and very specifically that there is no cost analysis, feasibility study or basic business plan to substantiate such specificity. I believe the intention behind the resolution is to achieve the best possible option, but unfortunately the wording does not allow for this facility to be even considered as separate from the Moncton Aquatic Centre or a smaller, more economical pool size. This resolution, unfortunately and unintentionally, commits council and ratepayers to fund a facility that has a high potential of being an uneconomical legacy for years to come. The resolution also talks to outsourcing of management and operation, which means council remains the sole investor and owners of a facility that currently runs a loss at approximately 200 Ks per year, and then to then seek expressions of interest for leasing the management and operations. If council had the financial capacity to do this, then that would be fine. but it does not. It does not have the financial borrowing or cash in bank to take on such capital expense, which leads me to point 4. In consideration of points 1 to 3, for this region to have a much needed hydro pool, we need commercial investment. For commercial investment to be attracted to this, we need it to be economically viable over the long term, and for it to be economically viable, we need it to offer flexible options such as with or without the Moncton Aquatic Centre, the size of pool or pools. An investor may wish to include a creche or a cafe. It points to the need to offer flexibility, to guarantee an investor has return on their investment. Otherwise, why would any astute business person be interested in such a facility? In the motion, the original motion, the very original, and in the rescission motion, points A to B allow for this flexibility and more likely to find the right investor to build on the right facilities for this region. Therefore, I strongly encourage councillors to consider an amendment, that makes Part D. And that includes to have a subcommittee based on a terms of reference, to make sure that terms of reference is done first. So just let me find the wording, and I will put that motion forward. Sorry, I have lost it. Okay. So the amendment that I am putting forward is that the terms of reference be developed, and I think all councillors received a copy of this amendment, be developed to establish an advisory subcommittee of council to oversight, advise, agree the timeline for implementation of, and would you like me to email that to you, Hayley, or bring it up to you? Yeah, review and consider market intelligence gained through A to D, make recommendations to council on the course of action after consideration and analysis of results, and that 5 councillors be elected, an F would be for 5 councillors to be elected to a subcommittee as per the terms of reference.
Councillor Witters, you happy with that? Oh, Councillor Gray, your microphone.
Oops, sorry.
Councillor Witters, you happy with that amendment?
Yeah, yep.
So, just before we continue, Owen, what happens if we lose power? We've got to, and it's supposed to be audio and video recorded, we've got to stop the meeting? Right. So you've got all that?
Yep.
So councillors, Councillor Witters?
Yeah, just as the seconder of that motion, as someone who was blessed with the ability to put 6 coherent words together, I won't bore you too much. I'll just support a lot of what Councillor Gray has said in her opening statement.
Thank you. Speaker, now we just might wait a second until all the amendments up so people are clear on what the whole motion is. Councillor Tiley, I'm quite happy to take the blame for that. So, Councillor Gray, that's how you envisaged it? Good. Okay, speaker against? If there's no speaker against, I'll put that. Those people in favour of the motion? 2, 4. Those people against? Then the motion is lost. Moving on to item 8.2, rescission motion. Move in a second, please. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Hang on, and Councillor O'Brien. Councillor O'Connor.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think Ms. Helen actually, in her Have Your Say, really explained the larger reasoning behind it. This is a very simple rescission motion, and I'm very grateful to the staff for presenting it so well with the highlighter. All we really want to do with this is to bring forward the reporting date for the working group to April next year, because the basis is that we do have an emergency, a climate emergency, and so April seems to be a more appropriate time because it will enable us to ascertain what steps can be funded, or maybe we can seek external funding to help us move forward. It's quite obvious that the state government, in particular the minister, is now very keen for local government to move ahead promptly. And I noted that all agricultural ministers, state and federal, met in Moree yesterday to address the absolute crisis situation that the agricultural industries across Australia are in. So I think it's appropriate that we move forward to April and actually do this with some deliberate haste. Secondly, and the other aspect of that is that our community's, blessed with an enormous pool of talent in this area, scientific, cultural, but particularly in this area of agriculture, climate change, social impacts of climate change. So we don't have to hunt around. We've got an absolute embarrassment of intellectual riches in this area already, and they are keen and have indicated their keenness to get working. Secondly, the other amendment is simply that the ESAC, which is the Correct Advisory Committee, be able to look at the draft terms of reference. And paragraph D, there is one extra word there, but I'm not going to fuss about it. I think the meaning is clear. And it is simply that as we work in partnership with the UNE's project 030, we don't give to them supervisory role, but we restore the wording that clearly shows that we're working, taking advice, but we're not asking them to supervise Council's working group or the report that they produce. And so that's it. Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
The idea of, can you hear me? The idea of, it's come back on. Okay. The idea of the emergency, of course, is that, every day counts. And I'm hearing more and more in the media how every day really counts with this. So there's no point in putting things off. And I also think after the last council meeting, it was clear that a few of the councillors hadn't quite and understandably understood that the April made a big difference in terms of budget deadlines. So that wasn't quite clear in our discussions last time, and I apologise if that I had a role in not making that clearer. But now that that's clearer, it does make a big difference to have it in April and not June, and so therefore I support that amendment. Thank you.
A speaker against? Councillor Gray.
I think what the community may not realise is this motion in itself has stopped progress of action on climate change due to fundamentally a date of a report. Now, it's a latest date. It wasn't the earliest date. If a report could have been done earlier, the option was to receive it earlier. to know that the climate change is an important issue, to get it right is important, and in light of the Eco-Art plan, which is on the agenda today, the necessity of 2 months becomes quite trivial. What the community may not realise, and this is the sad bit, is that there is so much wheeling and dealing going on behind the scenes and councillors positioning themselves. I just feel that this is just another useless way to try and see public light or public opportunities. Instead, what is heard in the community is how incompetent the staff are
Councillor,
in every workplace.
Councillor.
We have our good days and our not so good.
Councillor Gray.
Is that the people...
Can you refrain from those comments? Councillor Bailey.
The people have to...
Councillor Bailey. Councillor Gray, just a minute. I'm just trying to get the calmness on the scene.
So
Councillor, I've got to address the point of order first. Councillor Bailey, your point of order?
Excuse me, what?
Yes, sorry. Councillor Bailey, what's your point of order?
My point of order is she's made personal slurs against many of us, and I think that's not the way to do things correctly. I therefore ask her to withdraw those comments so that she can continue her motion.
I don't believe they are personal comments. If it means that councillors need to have some form of an apology, the apology is there. So be it. Now, instead of what the... So, if I might continue, please. I have made an apology. In what is heard in the community is how incompetent that staff behind the scenes are, and yet it is the demands that are put on our council staff that are creating the delays. And what is also of concern is their well-being. To make demands on a timeline that is not reasonable, it is not realistic, then how can we set this council up for success? How can they meet a timeline when even going through the motions of getting a working group together won't actually happen until probably April? This is just unreasonable demands from people that are clearly not in touch with what it actually means to be in council and deliver on these demands. I believe that this motion, the original motion, before the rescission, is realistic, and it looks after what can be done in an appropriate time and get a quality report back. That's why I am against this rescission motion.
A speaker for the rescission motion? Councillor Bailey, you're right to reply. Sorry, Councillor O'Connor.
Look, I thank Councillor Gray for those comments that were within the Code of Conduct, but I think the points are pretty clear. There hasn't been any effective delay caused by anybody moving the rescission motion. There may have been other delays arising from other causes, but that certainly shouldn't be laid at the door of those councillors here who just want this matter to be dealt with in a prompt manner. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, I'll put that to the vote. Those people in favour of the rescission motion? 6. Those people against? 4. The rescission motion is carried.
Can I have my vote recorded, please?
And Hayley, I'll do the same thing.
And me too, please.
Moving on to item 9.1, Hydrotherapy Pool Working Group. A mover and a second, please. Councillor O'Brien. Normally it's the person that puts the Is you moving it, Councillor Bailey?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
A seconder? Oh, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Bailey?
I think the motion is fairly self-explanatory. Establishing a working group to try and move the project forward, and I'm confident we can do that. And I am confident with the goodwill around the table to achieve a hydrotherapy pool, we can make that happen, particularly with the cooperation of the staff.
Councillor Bailey, you have read the management comment that really we should have the terms of reference first, so people who wish to be on this working group understand what the terms of reference are?
As I said, I have every faith in the staff to put forward a terms of reference that's workable for the committee.
So, Councillor O'Brien?
No, that's fine, thanks.
Anyone wish to speak against it? Nope. Councillor Gray?
To establish this committee without a terms of reference goes against good governance, and that needs to be noted. The intention is fine when we can put to defer a motion around the rail trail so people are educated and have time to absorb what the purpose is and a feasibility study. What is it about a delay on making sure that a terms of reference for good governance, why can we not wait for that? So I'll move a procedural motion to move this to February until terms of reference is created.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Witters, a procedural motion. Can I have the show of hands, those people in favour? Oh, just a minute. Hayley, you've got...
Mr Mayor, that's not a procedural motion, it's a direct negative. It's a different matter. We're either putting the 5 on or we're going to defer until we get terms of reference. Two different matters.
Councillor Tyler, I think it's all related to the management comments of deferring this until is...
Yeah, we saw that. We've noted that in the business paper.
It has been
The
moved...
terms of reference for most committees, if not all, are fairly generic. It can be worked up in an hour. It's not a big deal.
Okay, we still have a procedural motion there, so I'll put that to the vote. Those people in favour of the procedural motion? Those against? Lost. Well, moving back to the motion, Councillor Connor, you speak for it.
Yes, I would like to speak for it. I don't know why we suddenly got hung up on councillors wanting to do some basic work, but Councillor Gray did ask a question, why is there such a rush? And I think I do have an answer. 2 weeks ago I heard the story of a 9-year-old, and I've got permission to relate this. I won't identify the child, but there's a child with a profound congenital disability who requires hydrotherapy treatment to help him just get through the day. There's many, many older people as well I've spoken to who require access to a hydrotherapy pool. Armidalla's had that in the past, but now all of these people are being told, and particularly the 9-year-old boy who can't drive and his parents are not well off, oh, you'll have to go to Tamworth if you want hydrotherapy. It's too far. It's way too urgent a need in our community for us to sort of sit on our hands for another 2 months. We've just got to get on with this, and we've got to have cognizance of the fact that this is a really critical health service that is no longer existing in Armidale. The closest resort that people who need it is 112, 250 kilometre drive. It's outrageous, so we need to get onto it.
Councillor Witters.
Couple of questions, a couple of maybe contentious comments here. How do we nominate to get on that thing, or is the obvious wheeling and dealing that's being shown here today already nominated the 5? Do we have to go into suspend orders to nominate ourselves, or I don't understand how we're about to choose the 5 councillors, so I don't know what as chair of the sports council, with it being the sports, I don't without a terms of reference, I don't know what we're doing, how we're doing it. So do we suspend standing orders so we can put our case forward on why we should be it, or what's the go? Like, that's more of a question, I suppose, but any help would be handy.
Councillor Witters, I was going to, once this is moved, if it's accepted, then I'll go back to asking for those people who wish to be nominated, and it'll be just a show of hands. So, Councillor O'Brien, you've already spoken, so is there a speaker for the motion? Otherwise, Councillor Bailey,
I like the way the thunder comes every time I begin to speak. Maybe that's something symbolic. Look, I think it's fairly self-explanatory. We go for a number of committee, then we nominate the people. The only question I've got that I haven't clarified, has the CEO written to the state government to request an extension of the funding agreement for the hydrotherapy pool? And that's probably one question that's fairly important.
CEO, I'll just ask the CEO comment on that.
Councillors, yes, we have.
Thank you. Looking in summarising the vote, I think there's plenty of wisdom around this room, and in partnership with some of the senior staff or the staff that are allocated to work with the committee, I think we can come forward with some proposals. There are a number of groups in the region that have outsourced their pool. Many of them are aware that people like Nambucca have done it. Also, Inverell has done it, and they've reduced their running costs. So I think there are some options available. So I commend the motion to my colleagues, and I look forward to reporting back in the near future.
Okay, put that to the vote. Those people in favour of the motion? Carry. And those people against? Motion's carried. So I won't suspend standing orders. I'll just ask for those people who wish. There's 5 councillors. As 1, 2, any other councillors?
I nominate Councillor Gladley.
I'll just ask for a show of hands. So Councillor Gladley?
Yeah,
Yep.
I'll nominate for it.
So Councillor Witters, Councillor Bailey, Councillor O'Brien, and Councillor O'Connor. Anyone have objection to those 5? Just show of hands. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have got 5. So we've got Councillor Gillespie, Bailey, O'Brien, O'Connor, and Robinson. No one else wish to put forward to? Nope. Okay. They are the 5 people that have been elected to be on that committee. Moving to item 9.2. Now, item 9.2 and item 9.8 Councillor Gray, it's true it's got it down there, but I prefer the group to elect a chair because otherwise we can't do it. So I'd leave it to the, thank you Councillor Gray for bringing that, but Councillor Bailey, you happy to, as a group, to elect a chair later on? Good. So moving on to 9.2, funding for facilities at Generic Dam. Now this is basically the same as item 9.8.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I've spoken to the mover of item 9.2, and he and I have agreed I can withdraw mine, but I would like to put in a couple of amendments that would deal with the management comment below, so that I think we can go forward on this. So if I could be allowed to articulate my proposed amendments once Councillor Bailey has moved 9.2, I'm then happy to withdraw 9.8.
Well, the difficulty is both of these the Code of Meeting Practice has two sections in there, as as mentioned, that require management comments prior to.
Yeah,
Now,
Mr. Mayor,
Councillor O'Connor,
Sorry, finish.
because of the short duration between the November meeting and now, we do not have any opportunity to do that. And to know what our commitments are, what our co-contribution might be, I think the comments are very spot on. We should wait until the February meeting to look at this.
Mr. Mayor, my position is, and I do wish to press this, is that my amendments will deal with the management objections. And I've discussed this with Councillor Bailey, and he's happy for me to put up those amendments in his motion.
Okay. Moving forward,
just a quick question around that. If the management's comment's correct, and again, it goes back to the Code of Meeting Practice, which we sort of missed out anyway earlier, but if Councillor O'Connor has, if this is to be deferred to the next council meeting, then it can be put up with the amendments at the next council meeting. And so if it's not to be put today, it can still. So instead of talking about it and putting it down because it doesn't meet the Code of Meeting Practice, which is what the Code of Meeting Practice is there for, the amendments that the two movers of basically the same motion can put in a new motion at the next thing with their amendments in it. Is that correct?
No, her amendment will
So,
deal
Councillor O'Brien, I understand that Councillor O'Connor is willing to withdraw her motion if Councillor Bailey's motion, which is 9.2, is debated, and therefore Councillor O'Connor will put amendments to that motion.
I believe that will deal with the concerns that management has noted.
Yes, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder then for this.
I'll move it and accept and reserve my right to speak until I hear the amendments.
So, seconder? Okay. So, Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. Because my goodness, still not raining. I might ask the CEO to comment on a couple of aspects, which is the having external design and also the requirements by council to even get to the stage of applying for an external for a grant. So, Councillor Witters? No, you decided to have a right to reply. Yep. So we're going through the system, which is Councillor Witters. Councillor O'Connor. Councillor O'Connor. Councillor O'Connor, you did speak for quite some time on it. So, Councillor O'Connor. Councillor. Thank you, Councillor.